Assalamu alaikum. My name is Jalees Rehman. I'm a cell biologist, a molecular biologist, and a physician. I'm also a member of the board of Faith in Place, which is an Illinois-based interfaith environmental organization. I'm giving this talk today in response to a request by CMGT, Chicago Muslim Green Team, which is a really wonderful organization that attempts to raise environmental awareness in the Muslim community. And this talk is being given as part of the Green Ramadan series of talks organized by CMGT. I really laud their efforts, and I encourage you to check out the CMGT website. This is also the month of Ramadan, and I think this is as good a time as ever to talk about the importance of environmental issues and related issues such as environmental justice, social justice. So as in every Ramadan, I think there are a few core principles that we become aware of, and one of them is obvious, which is the value of food. When you deprive yourself of food and drink for most of the day, and then you're allowed to eat at the end of the day, at Maghrib time, you really appreciate the value of food, the value of water that you can drink, healthy water. And I think every year when we go through Ramadan, it is just a reminder, and I hope that these lessons that we learned during Ramadan, such as the value of food, stay with us throughout the year. It shouldn't be that we learn these lessons during the month of Ramadan and that we then forget these values. So the value of food is one of the core lessons that we always learn in Ramadan. Another core lesson, I think, is social justice. Not everybody has access to drinking water. Not everybody has access to adequate food like we do. And during fasting, all Muslims who fast similarly are deprived of food and water for a long part of the day. So in many ways it's an equalizer, whether we are rich or poor, no matter what race we come from, no matter what our age is, we all experience the same amount of food deprivation. And I think it is a reminder, especially for those of us who are socioeconomically privileged, that there are many others in this world who are not that privileged. And even though we only fast for a limited amount of time, at least during that time period, we can maybe sense the dire situation that other humans face all the time, not just during Ramadan. And that raises our awareness of social issues. I think a third lesson that has come to the forefront in Muslim communities in recent years during Ramadan is the importance of avoiding waste. I remember a time in the United States, for example, Muslim communities in the United States, but also in other countries, during which excessive banquets, lavish banquets were celebrated during the month of Ramadan. And I think people felt that that was really not in the spirit of Ramadan, because it resulted in the wastage of food. And not just food itself, but it also resulted in other forms of wastage, such as wasting plasticware, wasting water. And I think in recent years, the Muslim communities are realizing how important it is to conserve food and how to minimize waste. And I think every year, Ramadan is an important reminder of, as you value food, you also try your best to avoid wasting food. Social justice, the sense of camaraderie that we feel with all humans in the world, especially those who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, also leads us to another point, which is environmental justice. And environmental justice refers to the fact that depending on how rich you are, depending on whether you can afford to live in a community which is free from pollution or has minimal pollution, that determines your access to healthy air, healthy water. As you may know, neighborhoods in which people have high levels of poverty are often located in areas with high levels of pollution. So not only are they exposed to polluted air and polluted water, or for example higher levels of lead in the water, but they're also exposed to health risks that come from living in those environments. So poverty, due to the environmental issues in their neighborhoods, in their communities, result in poor health. There are also many communities that struggle with their economic status, also often have a lack of access to fresh food. So for many of us who are privileged, it's very easy for us to buy fresh vegetables, buy fresh fruits. But the problem is that, for example, in the United States, fresh food costs much more than what we call junk food or processed food. And I think that's part of this, the interface between social justice and environmental justice, is that we are aware of this fact that many fellow citizens live in neighborhoods which struggle with environmental issues, and that leads to substantially worse health for our fellow citizens. In addition to environmental justice, I think Ramadan is a great reminder of how important environmental issues in general are. So environmental awareness. When we eat our food, we should remind ourselves that it is a bounty, a gift from nature. Eating food during Ramadan, especially at the end of the day when we are finally allowed to eat, while eating, we should have respect and gratitude for plants and animals that allow us to partake in this food. But I think that our respect for plants and animals has to go beyond just their role as providing food. That's a given. We obviously know how important plants and animals are as a food source, but I think we have to go beyond that and not just think that this is their primary job, is to provide food for us. No, we have to realize that we live in a network of creatures, networks which we refer to in science as ecosystems, and we are part of ecosystems, just like many plants and animals are part of ecosystems. And whether or not a plant or animal is a food source, it is still part of an ecosystem, which is a very delicate balance in our world. And it is our duty to help maintain these ecosystems. It is our duty to help preserve species of plants, species of animals. And I think as we thrive, we have the responsibility to make sure that nature thrives with us. That is the only long-term way for our planet as a whole to succeed. So what are the threats that plants and animals face? I think if you look throughout the world, wherever humans stop respecting plants and animals, whenever humans stop respecting nature and the complexity and the wonders of nature, it leads to environmental disasters. Plants and animals can become extinct. I think that there's very strong scientific data that humans are one of the major drivers of extinction of animal species. So just the fact that we enter a land and we stop respecting the value of that land and the plants and the nature and the animals that reside in the land by, for example, exploiting the land, by just building factories, by manufacturing, by extracting important nutrients from the soil without giving back to the soil. All of that disrupts the ecosystems and can be very detrimental to the lives of the animals and plants there. When we create plastic waste, which is something that cannot be digested, it cannot be degraded by nature, animals and plants don't have enzymes to get rid of plastic waste. Instead, plastic as microplastic gets stuck in animals and can be toxic. It can kill them. So these are just examples of how, when we are not careful, when we do not respect nature, we can really create environmental disasters. Climate change, I think, is perhaps one of the most important issues that we will be facing in the 21st century, where massive emission of carbon dioxide when we burn fossil fuels like oil or coal are gradually but persistently changing the climate of this world, raising temperatures, and our plants and animals are not attuned to live in an environment with these higher temperatures, and it's causing havoc for nature, for our ecosystems, throwing everything out of balance. And plants and animals are suffering first, but of course climate change would ultimately also affect us, whether by creating floods that will destroy coastal areas, coastal cities, coastal dwellings for humans, but also, for example, by creating temperatures in which plants can no longer thrive and food suddenly will become much more difficult. We talked about social justice earlier, but we have to realize that many humans who are barely able to survive because of the limited food resources they have in the setting of climate change, if climate change continues to get worse and worse, temperatures continue to rise, the stress on crops, the stress on plants will become so immense that millions of humans could be facing food insecurity, even worse than they are now, to the point where they may not be able to survive anymore because of the food issues that will arise. So this is the time for us to think very, very carefully, what can we do as individuals? How can we take the next step to prevent worsening climate change? How can we do our part? And our part can be on a very small level by avoiding wasting food, avoid wasting water, avoid creating unnecessary plastic waste, and avoid unnecessary waste of energy, whether it is how we drive our cars, how much heating or air conditioning we use. Can we do with less and thus lead to less fossil fuel being burnt or consumed that will lead to less emissions of carbon dioxide? Every one of us can do our part, and I think Ramadan, when we think about social justice, we think about environmental justice and the value of food and nature, is a good time to start making some important resolutions of what can we personally as individuals do to contribute to a more sustainable environmental future. Lastly, I still want to touch on one more topic, and I think that this is a very unusual Ramadan for many of us. One major aspect of Ramadan is that we get together for iftar time and celebrate together when we can break the fast in the evening, and hopefully we do it in a way that leads to minimal wastage or no wastage of food and no wastage of plastics, no unnecessary creation of plastic waste. This is how we should be doing it. This year we are living in a time of a pandemic, and the COVID-19 pandemic, which is forcing us to isolate households from each other to reduce the risk of transmitting the SARS-CoV-2 virus. This is essential that we respect each other's health and minimize the spread of this virus. Even during Ramadan, when we're normally so used to social interactions, to Taraweeh prayers in the mosques, in the masjids, at night, the pandemic concerns where socializing can become a health risk overrides our traditional ways of how we celebrate Ramadan and how we partake in Ramadan. What this pandemic has done is it has also shown us that there are major differences, class differences, socioeconomic differences, because it turns out that individuals who are socioeconomically deprived, who are vulnerable, ethnic minorities that struggle with poverty are the ones that are most affected by the pandemic, and they're also unfortunately and tragically the most likely to get very sick, and pass away during this pandemic. So as this pandemic forces us to isolate and not celebrate Ramadan the traditional way like we used to do, it gives us an opportunity to maybe think more deeply about those issues I just addressed, such as social justice, environmental justice, social disparities, and environmental awareness, our duty, how to sustain the environment, and think about when this pandemic uncovers the disparities between human beings, when it uncovers the stressors that many humans are facing, we can maybe learn from this pandemic and think about what will we do once this pandemic is over. How will we value social interactions? How will we do our part to overcome social injustice, environmental injustice? So I want to thank you for listening, and I wish you a remainder of the wonderful, blessed Ramadan for the remainder of the days that we still have. And I also, most importantly, wish you a healthy and safe time during this pandemic. Please try to keep yourself safe, keep your families and friends safe, and help out each other as much as you can while maintaining social distancing and while maintaining your health and other people's health. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.